Years ago, I was living with my ex-boyfriend. We had just moved into a new house, a two-bedroom house that seemed perfect for starting a new phase of life. It was simple but cozy, the kind of house you imagine making happy memories in. We were excited, putting every piece of furniture in its place and trying to make everything feel like home. We decided to turn the back room into an office since we needed a space to work. There was one small detail that bothered us. To get to the only bathroom in the house, you had to go through the office. This made us uncomfortable, especially when we had guests who slept on the couch in the living room. The idea of someone coming into our room to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night seemed too personal. After a month of living there, I started to get used to the place. At first, I felt like every creak and strange sound was the new house's fault, as if it was still adjusting to our presence. But one night, something happened that made me question whether we were really alone there. It was a Friday. I remember it like it was yesterday. My ex-boyfriend went out with his work friends, and as usual, I would be home alone. I didn't mind. I liked having these nights to myself. I planned a quiet night. Takeout, a series marathon, and who knows, maybe I would go upstairs later to play with the computer. Everything was calm, except for some strange noises that, from time to time, came from the house. It was something soft, like a small crack or a slight sound of something dragging. At first, I ignored it. It must have just been the wind, or maybe the sound of the house itself, I thought. As the night went on, those sounds started to make me a little uneasy. It was as if the house was trying to tell me something. I kept my ears open, waiting to hear more to understand what it was. But every time I tried to pay attention, the sound simply stopped, as if they were playing with me. It was a strange feeling, as if something or someone was watching me, but still, I went about my routine. After eating and watching TV for a few hours, I decided to go upstairs to the back room, where my office was, and use my computer before going to bed. At that time, we still didn't have a landline, and to make matters worse, my prepaid cell phone was out of credit. I wouldn't be able to call anyone or ask for help if something happened. But I didn't think much of it at the time. I sat in my office with only a small lamp on. The light was dim, barely illuminating the room, creating shadows that danced on the walls. I was so focused on typing on my laptop that I almost didn't notice the first noise. It was a soft sound, like a slight rattle, almost imperceptible. I stopped for a moment, trying to listen better. I turned off the music and prepared to listen. The silence in the house was eerie, the kind of silence that makes your heart beat a little faster. I walked to the front door, took a quick look outside, but there was nothing. Everything was quiet. I went back to the office, still suspicious, and looked out the window. The backyard was small and surrounded by a high brick wall with a heavy wooden gate. There were no lights outside, and the darkness made it seem like the world stopped just beyond that wall. I tried to calm myself down, convinced that it was just my imagination. I turned on the music again, but about 10 minutes later, a completely different sound caught me by surprise. It was like two pieces of metal slowly rubbing against each other, with someone trying their best to be discreet. But now I knew that there was something out there. Fear began to take hold of me. I got up slowly and went to our bedroom. There was an iron bar that we had found when we moved in the back of a closet. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my hand, as if it were the only thing that could protect me. I went back to the office without turning on the lights, trying to be as quiet as possible. I closed the door and locked it. I grabbed a chair and placed it under the doorknob as a way of ensuring that no one would open it. Silence reigned again, and for a moment, I thought it was all over. I sat there, my heart racing, trying to convince myself that this was all just a silly scare. But then I heard the whispers. It wasn't in my head. Two low male voices were talking outside. The words were muffled, but it was clear that they weren't coming from inside the house. The office window was slightly open, and the whispers seemed to be coming from somewhere near the gate. My heart began to pound so hard that I thought they could hear me. I went to the bathroom, which had a window overlooking the alley behind the house, and stood on the sink to get a better view. I opened the window just enough to hear the whispers. Although I couldn't understand every word, I got the gist. They were talking about the valuable things we had in the house: guitars, computers, my DSLR camera, the TV. They knew I was alone. They knew enough to wait until I was asleep before breaking in. Anguish overcame me, and I stood frozen for a moment, trying to decide what to do. Then a loud, dull noise echoed through the yard. Someone was trying to break down the gate. I saw the gate twist and slam hard, as if at any moment it would fall down. With each slam, my fear grew. I huddled in the bathroom, gripping the iron bar with all my strength, hoping they wouldn't be able to get in. The darkness seemed more oppressive, and I could hear the men outside trying to force the gate open. And then, suddenly, everything changed. A bright light illuminated the yard. I was terrified, thinking they had turned on a flashlight. But then I heard barking and shouting. When I looked out the window again, I saw that the neighbors from the house across the alley had turned on a spotlight in the yard. The two men ran away. I lay there in the dark, shaking, until my ex-boyfriend returned many hours later, around 4 a.m. I couldn't sleep a wink for the rest of the night. When the sun finally came up, I went out into the backyard and saw that the gate was hanging by only one hinge. The keyhole was scratched, as if someone had tried to force it open. The only thing that kept those men from coming in was the neighbor's floodlight. If they hadn't turned on the light when they did, I can't even imagine what would have happened. This happened many years ago, more than 20, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. My son was born prematurely at 32 weeks. It was pretty scary at first, but we were lucky because he didn't have many problems. After a month, we were able to take him home, even though he needed a little help with oxygen and medication to keep his heart beating properly. But then, as soon as we got home, strange things started happening. Our cat, who used to always go into the baby's room, suddenly refused to come near it. And the dog, he would sit on the stairs and tilt his head, as if he was listening to something I couldn't hear. Sometimes, while I was changing my son's diaper, I would talk, thinking my husband had come into the room. But when I turned around, I realized I was alone the whole time. A friend had given my son a Big Bird toy, the character from Sesame Street. It was a hide-and-seek toy. He would say hide and seek when you covered and uncovered its eyes. But suddenly, the toy started to go off on its own, even when no one was around. It got to the point where I put it in a box in the closet, but it kept turning on out of nowhere. The feeling that I wasn't alone in the house grew stronger and stronger. Then why parents got us a baby monitor called Angel Care. It had a pad that went under the mattress and would go off if it didn't sense movement, like the baby breathing. Since my son was so tiny, weighing only 5 pounds, less than 3 kilos, the alarm would go off several times and I would run to his room to check on him. And he always was. I thought the alarm was going off because he was so light that the pad couldn't feel his movements. During this time, I started having strange dreams. In the dreams, I would see a woman in my son's room. I could never see her face, just her shadow, with long hair, standing next to the crib as if she were watching over him. I didn't know what to make of it, but it was a recurring dream. One night, something happened that I will never forget. We had had the baby home for a month, and he still needed oxygen and medication. Our room was next to his, and my bed was near the door. I was sleeping when suddenly I felt someone shaking me hard on the side of the bed. I woke up startled and looked at my husband, thinking it was him, but he was fast asleep on the other side of the bed. With my heart pounding, I got up quickly and went to my son's room. I immediately turned on the light, which I never did. When I did, I heard a small sigh coming from the crib. Did you know that sometimes babies suddenly stop breathing? And to get it back, sometimes they just need a scare or a stimulus. I believe my son had stopped breathing, and turning on the light made him start breathing again. After that, the dreams about the woman continued, as did the strange things in the house. The cat moving away, the dog acting weird, and the Big Bird toy going off by itself. All of this lasted until the day my son no longer needed oxygen or caffeine. Then, all of a sudden, everything stopped. The cat came back into the room, the dog stopped acting weird, and the toy never turned on by itself again. You know what I think? I believe someone came to our house with the baby as a sort of guardian to take care of him. In my dreams, it seemed like a young woman, maybe in her early 20s, and I felt like she had Native American roots, which makes sense since we are Canadians. I will always be grateful to her. I believe she was the one who woke me up that night, shaking me, so I could save my son. If it weren't for her, I don't know what would have happened. I didn't realize how serious this story was until I got older. It happened one afternoon when my mom left my brother and I alone at home. He was about 12 or 13, and I was younger, only 9. We were in the living room, and I was watching him play Xbox. My brother was wearing headphones and talking to his friends, when suddenly, we heard someone knocking on the door. It was the door that was in our garage, which was already kind of strange, because people usually knock on the front door, right? I ran to the door without thinking, and when I opened it, I saw a grown man I had never seen before. The only thing between us was a screen door, which wasn't even locked. He asked if our parents were home, and at that moment, I started to feel butterflies in my stomach. It seemed strange for him to be there, at the garage door. Our garage was empty, and my mom had taken the only car, so he must have known that there were no adults home. At that moment, I felt very scared, although I didn't know exactly why. At that moment, all I could think about was my brother. I never had a father figure, but my brother was always a guy who made me feel safe, like he was the strongest guy in the world. Even though I was scared, I managed to say, "No, but my big brother is here." That's when the man tried to open the screen door. He was already putting his hand on the door when out of nowhere, like a miracle, my brother's arm appeared behind me, went over my shoulder, and held the door firmly. He stepped in front of me, held the door tightly, and the man backed away. Startled by my brother's presence, my brother went into the garage, closed the door behind him, and started talking to the man. The man said he was interested in buying an old swing that we had in the front yard. But my brother was blunt. "No, we're not selling it." After that, he went back inside as if nothing had happened, put his headphones back on, and continued playing. I just sat there and watched him play. At the time, I didn't think much about what happened. But as I got older, I realized how scary it was. Not because of what happened, but because of what could have happened. When I think about it now, it gives me chills. I like to imagine that the man just wanted to rob the house, but the truth is, you never know. My brother and I were so carefree, having no idea of the danger that could be right there on our doorstep. This happened last year, and it was really weird. My friend and I were starting to work on a film project, so we went out to look for cool places to film. Then we decided to go to a swing bridge that was about an hour away from our city. It was an old, wobbly bridge, about 400 feet long and 60 feet high, and it was only for people to walk on, because you couldn't run or ride your bike there. On the side, there was a bridge for cars. We took some pictures and started to cross the bridge, going to the other side, where there were train tracks and a neighborhood. Halfway across, we heard shouting coming from the other bridge, the one for cars. When we looked, we saw a woman standing there, waving her arms as if she was trying to get our attention. She was shouting someone's name, but none of us knew the name. So we told her that she was confused, thinking that would solve the problem. But surprisingly, she didn't move. She just stood there, looking at us, increasingly worried. We thought it was strange, but tried to ignore it and move on. But then, out of nowhere, she started running towards us really fast. That was really weird, but we laughed and continued on our way. When we got to the other side of the bridge, we started filming near the train tracks. I know, it's not very safe, but it was a common spot on the trail. While filming, we suddenly heard a familiar voice screaming again. It was the same woman. This time, she was on top of a hill, on the other side of the tracks, screaming the same things. We yelled back, explaining that we didn't know her and that she was mistaking us for other people, but this time, she started running again, coming straight towards us. Now, we were really scared. We had no idea why she was so desperate to get to us. So, we quickly grabbed our things and headed back to the swing bridge. Even though we knew we shouldn't run on it, we walked as fast as we could, and the bridge started to sway. It was as if our survival instincts had taken over. By the time we got halfway across the bridge, the woman was already very close. At first, she was still screaming, but soon her voice became more irritated, even angry. I looked back to see how close she was and realized that she had stopped at the beginning of the bridge. Only this time, I saw that she was holding something behind her back. She stopped running, but we didn't. We kept running until the end of the bridge. When we got to the other side, we looked back and saw that she was still there, fiddling with something in her hands. My friend took out his phone and started recording. As soon as she realized we were filming, she turned around and walked away. To this day, we don't know why she was chasing us or what she was holding. Sometimes I wonder if she needed help. It's strange to think that even after we told her several times that we weren't the people she was looking for, she kept following us. After that, I had trouble sleeping for a week, wondering what might have happened if she had caught up with us. This happened a few years ago when my brother and I were living in an apartment we were renting together. It was February, and the rent was due on the 5th. We didn't want to be late, so we went to the bank to withdraw the money. The air was cold because of the winter, and as we walked home, I noticed how empty the neighborhood was that day. When I got home, I took the money and went to the rental office to pay. Everything was normal so far. I paid, got the receipt, and started walking back to the apartment. That's when things got weird. As I was walking back, I looked across the street and saw a tall, thin man with his pants hanging down a little at his waist. He was walking ahead of me. I just glanced at him quickly, the way you glance at someone while you're walking, without thinking much. But then, all of a sudden, the guy started yelling at me all angry. "Hey, no one's talking to you. No one's thinking about you." I was really surprised and kind of scared. I didn't want to pay attention to him. So I pretended not to hear him and kept walking, trying to ignore him. But the further I walked, the more he yelled. He seemed more and more irritated. To make matters worse, he crossed the street towards me, but instead of coming straight to me, he walked to the steps of an apartment building right in front of me and sat down there. Now, I would have to walk past him to get to my apartment. He watched me, quiet, but with a look on his face that he could explode at any moment. My heart started beating really fast, and all I could think was, will he try to attack me when I walk by? Or will he follow me to the apartment? That's when I remembered the back entrance of the building. I decided to go around there, so I wouldn't have to go through him. I went in through the back, got to my apartment, and told my brother everything. We both thought it best to call the police. We did, and it took about 7 minutes for the police to arrive. Meanwhile, I was peeking out of the upstairs window and seeing the guy walking around the neighborhood. He seemed a little nervous and kept looking back, as if checking to see if anyone was following him. When the police arrived, I explained everything and gave them a description of the man. They searched the area but couldn't find him. They said they would keep an eye out, but after that, nothing happened. To this day, I don't know who that guy was or what he wanted, but I keep thinking, if there hadn't been a back entrance to the building, things could have been a lot worse.